Okay, welcome to today's video where we're going to go through the team economy win rates in Group A at ESL Pro League Season 13. So when it comes to team economy win rates, we're actually talking about these things right here. So this is the terminology we're going to use. Full buy rounds is FBR, which means $20,000 worth of equipment or more. So those are your regular full gun rounds essentially. That's probably going to be the majority of the rounds that we see coming up here. Half buy rounds is where you're trying to force a buy-in, but you don't quite have as much equipment value. Low buy rounds is those those rounds where you have like Deagle armor sort of thing, and then eco rounds are basically throwaway rounds for the most part, but you might see some Deagles here and there. So let's have a look at the leaders that come through. So we actually have Heroic winning the full buy rounds, no surprise there, right? 64.4%, they won the group. It's expected that the teams that perform well will probably have the highest percentage when it comes to full buy rounds, you know, barring any, I guess, some crazy situations, I suppose. That's like the number one thing for this, at least. Half buy rounds, OG doing very, very well, nearly the same percentage as the full buy rounds that Heroic had in terms of his half buy, so they did well with less. Low buy rounds, we saw not much to write home about. 3 teams tied for first, all on 20%. Nothing too crazy there. And then on eco rounds, weirdly, Big Clan somehow had a higher win percentage with less than $5,000 than they did with $5,000 to $10,000. So I don't really know what to think of that, and that's a bit of a weird anomaly, I guess, even though the sample size is pretty good, right? You've had 5 best of 3s. It's a pretty good amount of rounds to actually have a look at. So we're going to look at each individual team as well. So like I just said, they've got the weird anomaly with the eco rounds being better than their low buy rounds. You know, over a full year or something, this would probably regulate and we'd see that the low buy rounds are a bit more successful. Unless in the eco rounds they play a bit differently. Like, that's where you start to wonder. For example, on eco rounds, we often see teams do irregular stacks, and sometimes these stacks pay off, right? The one in let's say 1 in 12, 1 in 15, something like that. And that's probably where this comes from. Some rounds where the other team mess up and then they just capitalize. And then rounds like this, the other team are probably thinking, oh, okay, they should be low buy, they shouldn't really have much, maybe deal armor. Whereas this round it'd be like, okay, they definitely should be save or ecoing. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird one with this whole situation. But obviously, buy rounds are better than the half buy rounds, not surprising. You know, having a percentage this close though shows quite a lot of interesting things with it, because it means that they're not performing that much differently when they have technically probably half the value straight up in weaponry or just equipment in general, right? Low nades maybe. I suppose it depends as well on what maps they play often. Inferno, of course, is a classic staple we've seen Big Clan play in the past, and obviously utility is needed, which means they probably need these rounds a lot more than they do these ones. So we're actually going to move on to complexity now as well. So they're the one team, I believe, that has the 0 eco rounds won, which there's nothing special about that. I wouldn't put too much value into this situation. Low buy rounds, nothing really much to talk about there. And then half buy, quite a bigger difference here. Like this is, you know, they're right behind Heroic in terms of the full buy rounds, but half buy rounds, you know, it's less than 50%, but it's a big difference compared to the big one that we just saw previously. FPX now as well, so that was the 3rd team that actually did qualify as well through this group. They actually came through with complexity as well as Heroic. And their stats are pretty interesting. I mean, eco rounds, they won 2 of 16, pretty damn good. Low buy rounds, as again, they were tied for first. Half buy rounds, somehow worse yet again. Like, this is, I believe this is one of the lower ones we actually do see here as well. And then the full buy rounds, similar to what we saw from Big as well. Now Heroic, we'll jump in through here. Then again, there's another team with 0% on the eco rounds. A bit more rounds played than Complexity did, but again, there's nothing too special about this, in my eyes at least. So full buy rounds are the main talking point. They were very successful in the full buy rounds, which meant they probably had less reason to force too much into these rounds. And maybe sometimes this round, but 50% is pretty damn good for those rounds as well. So I think the main thing is the fact that they were successful, which meant they didn't have to do these rounds that often. OG is another one which is a bit peculiar, right? So they had the most full buy rounds in the entire group. They had 243 played. But they also had the least low buy rounds and least half buy rounds, whilst also having the most successful half buy rounds, as well as technically, for some reason, having better eco rounds than low buy rounds, but still, you know, they only won 3 of the 41 rounds in this area, which is pretty diabolical, if I'm perfectly honest. That's pretty awful. But they clearly put a lot more favour into their buy rounds, which is why they had so many of them. So that might be just the way they were calling things, perhaps. Like Lexi might be favouring more towards having a heavy economic style play rather than, risking more with the Eagles or something like that. And then the final team, of course, is going to be Renegades, where they didn't have a very fun showing, I think it's fair to say, in the group. They were pretty much manhandled in a lot of their games, and then the only win they get was against Big Clan, which was a bit of a surprise, and they showed a hell of a different performance in that matchup as well. But again, it's another situation where they had the least buy rounds in the whole group, and then that they had also the most low buy rounds. So it's like, okay, so they had a lot more rounds where they had half in, I guess, like the Eagle and Armour. And the win rate's not far off what we saw in the peak. It was 20% for this group. So it wasn't that bad, but obviously you don't really want to be saying, oh, well, we had an extra 10 low buy rounds, and we were converting 17% of them. That's great, yeah, nice one. Maybe you should probably save one more round and then have a higher chance of winning. Or even better, you wait till you have slightly more money, because apparently they were doing better in their half buy rounds than they were in the full ones. But that's going to be it from this one. I like to see if there was much interest in this sort of thing, and also maybe to then delve further into these numbers. For example, seeing, okay, Renegades had 77 full buy rounds won. How many were against full buys? Like how good are the teams in actually playing against other full buy rounds rather than just outright what their value is, what the other team is as well? Do teams lose to Ecas very often? That sort of thing. So leave a comment below if you'd like this sort of thing or you'd like to see more of this sort of thing as well. And thank you for watching.